Hi, I'm Dr. Chris Stevens, and this is the Psychology to Live By podcast.
Yeah, and I love the ego aspect of it too, because I think that's the worst thing you can do when you
Yeah,
create. It's like bringing in the ego, because ego always wants something or it's afraid of something. Usually,
yes,
that's
exactly.
right. And I think it was Quincy Jones who said, like, if you're thinking about money while you're making music, God walks out of the room.
Welcome to Psychology to Live By. Today, in this music and mental health podcast, I'm talking with artist, composer, and record producer Robert Koch, who is much better known by his stage name, Robert Koch. Originally from Germany, at the age of 13, he was inspired by MTV videos and embarked on his musical career. Now residing in Los Angeles, Robert has a stellar background in composing and producing his own work, as well as the work of other major artists. Our topics, as usual, are creativity and music and their relation to mental health, with a focus on what challenges our well-being and our creativity. And this includes what Robert has found that nurtures his own creativity, as well as his physical and mental well-being. I found this conversation very uplifting, and the many topics we touched on included the toll that touring took on him physically and psychologically, his decision to follow his passion and trust his intuition and actually stop touring, artistic sensitivity as a superpower, the relationship between intuition and a growing sense of coherence, meditation and accessing intuition, egolessness and the problems of the ego, healthy perfectionism and intrinsic motivation, being comfortable with the unknown, and other topics. So, well, hello, Robert. It's really lovely to meet you. We've already had a little chat in our setup, but we have about half an hour for this podcast, and for the listeners, I'll map out a terrain that we'll probably explore. We may well go outside of these parameters. Be happy to, but certainly the psychology of creative process itself, what we think creativity is, and how one goes about maximizing it, I guess. Obviously, you're composer, musician, producer. So I'd like to talk to you about your experience of the music industry, and then a related topic will be mental health and well-being as it relates to creativity and music, but also as it relates to the music industry. So there's, as we would say in Australia, there's heaps that we could talk about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward.
Perhaps we might start. I'd be very interested if you tell me about what's drawn you to your professional life, the musical creative life. I'm sure you've thought about that somewhat, and I'd be interested. And I'm sure the listeners would be too.
Hmm. You mean the question is what got me into music in the first place, or what
I
made it
think
a career rather than passion, or what is the question
yes.
exactly?
But both of those sounded pretty good.
Yeah,
But I think it's more what draws you to it. What's
right.
the experience that you're chasing or you've had
Mhm.
that keeps you coming, as it were?
Totally. I think it was excitement, and it's like a full body excitement, that got me into it in the first place. Just experiencing music that really made me feel something where I'm like feeling, excitement in my body, and I'm just like inspired, and that's kind of the initial thing. I remember I was maybe 13 or maybe 12 years old, and I was watching MTV because I lived in West Germany and there wasn't a
Yeah,
lot of international connections. There was no internet, like in the days where I grew up. So MTV was kind of the window to the world for me, and I saw music videos that really like got me excited, and I was like, wow, whatever these guys are doing, that's something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So I would say that excitement and inspiration are two words that probably encapsulate why I got into it and why I'm still at it, you know.
It's very interesting. MTV, of course, that brings back lots of memories for me. It may not be that relevant to some of our younger listeners, but what I'd like to just draw out on what you said there were two things that you talked about. You talked about it being embodied
Hmm.
was one aspect, and the other was very much about emotions. And I think we'll come back to those themes again and again because, like, even as you were describing those things, your face lit up. Um, did you know, like that big smile you've got now? And
The memory of it, yeah, you're right. You know, just like thinking about the excitement, just I guess makes the body excited again. You know, how the memories are linked to the physical experience.
exactly, and the life of the imagination is obviously it is about ideas, but it's about this. They're always emotionally fused, and music, in particular, is designed to communicate emotionally, and so and this is going to be very relevant, I think, later on when we talk about music and well-being, music and mental health,
Hmm.
and why, in my view, it's so important as a sort of antidote to a lot of the malaise in the world at present. In fact, it may be one of the most important things we can do. Anyway, so as a young man, there you were, really inspired and drawn in. And just give us a little snapshot of your progression. So that was 13, and you're now, what, 47, I think. Is that correct?
46, not quite
Oh,
47
I don't
yet,
want to
but
make you older than you are. Sorry about that.
you do. But I think my Wikipedia says 47 because this year I will turn 47. So
I see.
you probably read that online.
I did.
And you're right about 12, 13 being the time when I got into it. And I started playing drums in bands. This was like my early music education. From playing drums, I got into DJing, and from DJing, I got into beat making. From there was a short way into like wanting to be like a proper producer, you know, like really understanding mixing and engineering and all that, and producing other people. I got signed to Sony on the publishing side pretty early on, who put me like in sessions with other artists who I ended up producing and writing with and for. And then, you know, eventually I started my own solo artist career, which was now almost 15 years ago,
Wow.
and have been touring, performing, and recording artists since, you know. So that's it in
Yeah.
a nutshell.
No, well, that's a fantastic story, isn't it? And there's a few little jumping off points there. One is I'm going to be interested in asking you your view about the troubling issues of mental
Mm,
health in the music industry, especially given your experience, because your experience has been quite diverse. You
it
know,
is.
and just to share that the research, and this is international research on mental health in the industry, shows that the problems aren't confined to the artists. That
Mm,
the poor mental health, it seems to be fairly equally distributed across roadies and techies and
mhm,
events organisers and promoters and so on, music
mm,
managers. So the image that all the mental health problems have got to do with the sort of suffering, tortured artist are incorrect.
right.
Now
Good
they
point.
exist. They exist, of course, but they're a minority, a small minority.
Hmm.
So, given your diverse experience, I mean, I think you probably have some views about what the industry does to people. Would you like to share those with us?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I will share, for example, that in the days, because I'm not touring heavily anymore, I'm more of a studio person now, like more on the
Yeah,
composer side. I will play occasional shows, but they're very like selected and like boutique, I will say. You know, I'm not part of the grind of the touring industry anymore.
yeah,
And particularly what messed with my mental health too back then, because um, here was the scenario. I was earning good money. I was fairly successful. but I was unhappy, So I was like,
Mm.
what's wrong with this picture? It's like I'm
Mm.
living a dream, but it doesn't feel like I don't feel good about it, Like I feel almost
Yeah.
depressed. And what it was is like the heavy touring, like literally wasn't good for me health wise, like for my nervous system, for just like the sensitivity that I have as an artist. And I think that's true for a lot of artists that are just like thrown into this
Yeah.
almost a mill, and needing to play a lot of shows. And there's like the physical aspects of like sleep deprivation and like catching an early flight after a late night and doing that
Yes.
a couple of nights in a row, but also eating poor food and just like compromising on a lot of physical aspects that then bleed into the mental health of it, where you're like, I feel like worn out and run down. I should be enjoying this, but I'm physically not. And then also there's the whole pressure around I'm going to call it the fetish around data, which is of course more real now than it was when I started
Yes.
out. I
Mm.
mean, looking at Instagram numbers, Spotify followers, and all that, and this whole like compare and despair mindset, that every artist is sort of subject to. So you
Yeah.
put all this together, it's kind of a cocktail for a pretty unhealthy experience, and I needed to sort of sever the ties with some of these mechanisms and reinvent myself, because there's this belief that you need to be out on the road all the time and play as many shows as possible
Yeah.
and do all these things and push your limits. So in a nutshell, I experienced the industry and its confines as a very unhealthy setup for a sensitive artist, that most artists are sensitive because that's why they express themselves that way.
That's right. Oh, look, that's so wonderful. I, I tend to use exactly the same expression about the industry that you use, and that is that it's a special mix. It's a cocktail,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one designed to make people unwell. and
But
and in that cocktail goes a number of the things that you mentioned. There's the being away from home and loved ones. There's the sleep deprivation or disturbed sleep.
Mhm.
There's the poor diet. There's just the physical exhaustion, right?
Mhm.
There's the sort of adrenaline high, and then the crash after the shows, and these things are then cumulative. There's all the way it plays with people's egos as well, of course.
I,
Do you know the idea of fame? You be careful about what you wish for because you might just get it. And then there's not to mention the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll mythologies,
yep.
right? And how that plays around with the person's body and mind. And then layered on top, of course, is for most people, though it doesn't sound as severe for you, but is this sort of chronic financial insecurity,
Mm,
and this constant sense
yeah.
that I'm a phony, or I'm not going to make it, or I'm not good enough.
Right. No, for
And
sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and now I think it's even more amplified with, as you say, Spotify and social media.
Hmm.
People are having to engage in that a lot, and as we know, social media is not the healthiest place on earth
No, no.
because it's not
Just
very real.
rhythm and all that, So some
Yeah,
people a lot of artists don't want to be like a talking head on camera all the time in like TikTok videos or whatever.
I
And it's
know.
almost, don't do that, then, the algorithm is not going to favor your content. So what do? You like compromise your authenticity by just like playing somebody that you're not? Or do you just accept that, the algorithm is not going to show your content to as many people as you would like? So it's a bit of a conundrum there.
That's so nicely put. In fact, if I can share with you, I don't think I've ever really shared this with anyone. Terry McBride, who's the CEO of Network Music, I think, and you're signed up to Network now, I think.
Mhm.
He's a good friend. And I was doing some work in one of his businesses in Los Angeles, actually, and we were flying to Vancouver. And Terry leant across to me in the plane and said, "I think I should manage you." I said, what are you talking about, Terry?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you're kind of talent." And anyway, that led to this, Psychology to Live By, and the idea is to get what I do to a broader audience, because mostly it was confined to, the corporate world, running trainings and workshops and so on, and so then we recorded a whole lot of workshops, and then COVID happened, and the long form workshops weren't going to be able to be sold because the workplaces had moved on. People were sick of looking at screens,
Right.
for longer periods. Anyway, long story. They then said, I think you need a social media presence.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting because I've always been a pretty harsh critic of social media and not engaged with it at all. And I'm now on all the platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube,
You name it.
LinkedIn. And the logic was, well, if people want to find out about what you do, that's where they'll look. But just as you've described, there was a real struggle within me around authenticity. And how do I... but I think, my compromise has been, well, maybe I can be a little island of sanity.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
put some stuff in there that's okay.
yeah, totally. If you bring in if you feel like you're giving something that comes from an authentic place, then it's not that, compromised feeling of like, oh, I'm just like doing something because I have, So it's like, I guess the trick for artists, anyone on social media, is like, how can you customize this so it's an authentic expression for yourself, and not play, any role or whatever.
I think so.
The challenge.
Oh, no question. And well, it's complicated because we're such social creatures, and we're hardwired to really care what the village thinks.
Yeah. True.
And even if we don't, our intellect tells us that the criticisms of us, are illogical or ill-informed, it still hurts, and we still worry about the impact it has on the other people in the village, so you can't play in that space. And as you say, artists basically have to now, without that being an added, what we call psychosocial stressor. So all the things we were talking about before are psychosocial stressors that make the industry as a whole unhealthy for people. I was interested in passing. You talked about the sensitivity of artists, and I'll just give you a little bit of background here. My interests are largely in creativity in general, so not just about aesthetic creativity or artistic creativity, but human creativity. But I think you're right that in the music industry, with artists generally, there is a type of person. It's not necessarily the tortured artist who's starving in the garret, because actually the evidence, the research into creativity and mental health shows there's no relationship between mental ill health and creativity.
Oh, okay,
right?
Interesting.
So there's none. And so if you've got a mental illness, you're no more likely than to be creative or not creative. Right?
Got it. Yeah.
And while people are mentally ill, they're definitely non-creative.
Yeah, well, that's the downside of it, or like another downside of it.
Yeah, exactly. It can provide content subsequently, for people's explorations of if they've been depressed or anxious or they're bereaved or someone they love lost them,
Yeah.
So you can mine it subsequently when you're psychologically better, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
But to come back to your thing about sensitivity, what did you sort of mean by that? I mean, you said it like it was self-evident, and I think I know, but it might be useful to unpack that a little bit.
Oh, sure. By the way, there's a leaf blower outside. I hope you don't pick up on this. I hope Zoom represses the noise.
It's pretty good. These directional mics. No, we can't hear it at all.
Okay, good. So yeah, the sensitivity, that's interesting because I think it's sort of seen as a detriment by the artist subjectively. Like
Yeah.
I was thinking of myself like, oh, I'm too sensitive for all this, like why does it all affect me so much? Why am I not stronger and can just do away with like not sleeping and all these psycho social stressors that you mentioned?
Yes.
But I think it is a weakness. I would like to see it as a superpower because this is where the artist takes the creativity from. It's the
Yeah.
sensitivity. Almost like you have an antenna that picks up certain signals,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't have that antenna, then you wouldn't pick up on certain things. But then that signal also easily distorts because it's too much coming in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I
So that's
do.
that leaf blower is going crazy out there. But you hope
No,
you
we
don't.
honestly we can't hear it, so it's just annoying you.
Just annoying the hell out of me right now.
I know.
We're both talk about sensitivity, right? Here we
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Leaf blowers are fairly high on the Richter scale of annoyance.
Oh yeah, I agree. But yeah, that would be take on the sensitivity that I would like to reframe it as something that I'm happy about rather than me wanting to get rid of it or overcome it. I
Yeah.
used to be
You may
against.
need to come a little closer to the microphone while that
Okay,
leaf blower is going. It seems to have softened your voice. Yeah.
yeah, but I hope that answered your question around the sensitivity a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Let me just share with you a few thoughts around that, because as you know, my doctoral studies were on that creative process, and there's a couple of dimensions there that are relevant. For example, creative people in general tend to score a bit higher on a personality dimension called openness to experience.
Oh,
So it's basically some people hate change, and some people actually get bored very easily if there's not enough change. So some people are much more open to data, new stimuli, right? But of course, that creates complexity that has to be processed. All right.
right.
So that's one little piece. Another piece is what I call creative intelligence or creative emotional intelligence, and this is, I think, where you're talking about sensitivity, and and perhaps I think what you were also describing implicitly is intuition.
Oh, yeah,
Right. Yeah.
big one.
So
Big one.
yeah. So we might start with the and so in terms of personality, another dimension for particularly aesthetic creativity for artists is probably a little higher scoring on neuroticism, which is another way of saying emotional sensitivity. All right.
Okay.
And now the reason that's relevant is, let's see if I can say this with some economy. When we are working in domains where there are clear parameters, and you can more or less calculate the answer, all right, we don't need creativity. We've got knowledge in our minds. It's like literally doing arithmetic. You add it up and you get the answer. But obviously, creativity is not designed for that, not needed for that. What it's needed for are much more ambiguous domains where we're having to make new connections in the brain, not just run through the old ones.
Right.
And the emotional system, sorry, the whole cognitive emotional system is designed to allow us to anticipate the world. And when we find the world confusing and we can't anticipate it, it's uncertain, we feel anxiety. You'd know that when you have experiences of insight, creative insight, it's quite joyous, but it's also a relief, because there's a kind of breaking through that impasse of uncertainty and unknowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a sort of, suddenly you can make a meaning or a sense out of things. Now, it appears that this process is happening unconsciously all the time, and that you literally can't be conscious of something that hasn't formed up yet, but you can feel it emotionally because your system starts to feel a bit excited. It starts to feel a gathering coherence out of the uncertainty. And that's intuition. It's this feeling of knowing, and it's generally a feeling that I'm moving towards some new coherence.
I love that.
Yeah. And
I love coherence too. I think that's another big one, like the intuition that you speak to and the coherence.
yeah.
These are both things that I think about a lot. Because not to cut you short here, but just like
No, please.
The intuition is what I would say one of the most important things that I resort to in the creative. And then coherence, as opposed to interference, it's like a signal to noise ratio, if you will. Would be like even like in the body, like a system like the body, like healing would occur if there's coherence, right? So if there's not noise or like chaos. So that's what I seek in music. It's like the balance and the harmony, finding those
beautiful,
coherent, almost like aspect ratios or whatever between frequencies and sounds, and like the balance between it all. And the thing that guides me literally is intuition. And we come back to the body. I'm on my headphones, I'm on the speakers, and I'm just experiencing how does this feel in my body, what I'm doing right now. That stressed me. Would it feel better if I just muted this one track here and it would be more empty? And suddenly it starts breathing, and I'm like, this is actually feeling a lot better right now. And that's how I compose. I literally just like pay attention to how it feels in my body.
That's so interesting. Now, there's a lot of research on intuition, and one of the clear findings is we should only trust the intuitions of people who have expertise in that domain.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, we're talking about professions here. We're not talking about everyday intuition. That's different. And if you think about it, you're sampling out of 30 plus years of all the information and knowledge and practices it's all sitting in your system as potential to be connected, right? You've subsumed all these patterns, these coherence making patterns of understanding. So you'll tend to, when you quieten down, you'll tend to see the forest for the trees. There's a thing as we get older too, is that our intelligence changes from what's known as fluid intelligence, which is sort of peaks in our 20s and then declines forever thereafter. So fluid intelligence is like things like how fast your brain works and how efficient it is, and memory.
Right.
You would have noticed that some of these changes, I'm sure. But what overtakes it is a different kind of intelligence. It's just, speaking of forgetfulness, the other kind of experience is called crystallized intelligence.
Interesting. I never heard about that. So what does crystallized intelligence mean?
So crystallized intelligence is like, if you could think of the mind as a vast library filled with millions and millions of books. So as a kid, you've only got like 100 books. And every book is completely and utterly cross-referenced. So it's a sort of model for the neuronal networks in the brain, right? The more books and the more intricately they're cross-referenced, the more likely you are to immediately look at a scene and see pattern.
Right.
Whereas the novice cannot.
So is it together? Is it like the connection of information? So there's more available, and then
Yes.
you're able to connect it better.
And connecting it better, seeing patterns, finding meaning. So
Oh,
it's we think it's the neurological basis for wisdom,
mm-hmm.
right?
I love
But as a
beautiful.
maturing artist, of course, but to access it, you have to quieten down.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And if we have high anxiety, it shuts that facility down.
that is so interesting. Yeah, well, that speaks to like the meditation practice or some other things that I do to quiet things down. Like
Tell us about that. Tell us what you do to enhance the creative process.
well, I've been meditating for about 8 years now, and I meditate
Uh-huh.
twice daily. So, like in the morning
Uh-huh.
for 20 minutes, and then in the afternoon.
And what kind of meditation do you do?
It is transcendental meditation, but right now it's a little less formal. That's what I started
Hmm.
out with.
Yeah.
But right now it's literally like whatever I feel the moment requires of me. Like I'm not, because
Yeah.
transcendental meditation is like mantra based, so you're like
That's
using the
right.
sound object to hold on to. I don't always do that. Sometimes it's literally just me observing my thoughts and letting them go as they come, and letting them go as they come, like that whole process.
Yep.
Sometimes it's just like a breath meditation. It could be also a sound meditation where I'm just like doing a deep listening thing, just connecting to sound,
Hmm.
beyond the intellectual aspect of it. Because as a composer, you would always also scan sounds
Mm.
intellectually. What does this remind me of? How is it put together? It's very hard for me to listen to music without analyzing it.
Yeah.
But if I deliberate deep listening experience, then I'm just like in it with the sound itself, and I'm like devoid of thought,
Yeah.
ideally, and like experience the sound more purely, which is also meditation for me. So there's a bunch of modalities around the big pot that is
And
meditation.
and what drew you to these kinds of practices?
Anxiety and the monkey mind, and just like
Ah,
a bit
yeah.
brain. Like it's always born out of a need for like fixing or like
Yeah.
bettering some condition, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, in Buddhist terms, it's always born of suffering, right? And but what I'm interested in here is this meditative consciousness, or this sort of. So one of the factors that I, my research showed that when people are very creative is what I call their capacity for egolessness. So this
Mm,
capacity to forget self, and to become fully immersed, non-self consciously in their practice. So I'm assuming that the practice of meditation enhances your capacity for that. Is that the connection that you've drawn?
yeah, yeah, and I love the ego aspect of it too, because I think that's the worst thing you can do when you
Yeah.
create. It's like bringing in the ego, because ego always wants something or it's afraid of something. Usually,
Yes.
that's
Exactly.
about right. And I think it was Quincy Jones who said, like, if you're thinking about money while you're making music, God walks out of the room. So
Fantastic.
right. So that's a great example of not having this grasp ego mindset, like, oh, how are people going to respond to this? Is this going to be a successful track or whatever?
Yeah.
Or like fear-based thing, if it can be just like the intimacy with the moment and the sound and the joy of creating it,
Yeah.
then that's really something very pure, I think. And ego is not involved in that. It's just like experience and high vibration, rather than for me, like ego tends to have like a low vibrational feel to it. Low vibration as in like it pulls you down
Yes.
rather than lift up, in terms of mood. Like I'm not talking about vibration as in frequencies here, but just
No, I
like,
know. I
is it
understand.
uplifting? Is it uplifting the spirit, so to speak? Or the mood, or is it not? So, and that's what I mean when I say like a low vibration. It can also be like a low feeling or whatever other word you want to use there. But the
Yeah.
ego lowers. It's an energetic lowering for me. So if I'm
Yes.
like in an ego-driven state, I'm usually like very pensive and like worried. So I try to transcend that as much as possible.
Now, I hope I remember the thoughts that were rushing through my mind as you were speaking. So one of them was about the distinction between, we were talking about sensitivity before, and perhaps, in a healthy sense, neuroticism, and so some measure of this body. I can't remember the full quote or even who the researcher was, but they talked about intuition as the body being a kind of resonating chamber for the world.
Okay.
And that really spoke to me. And you sort of see it's reflected in what you're talking about in sort of vibrational. We're not talking literally, of course. We're using metaphors, but
Of course, yeah, that's what I meant. Vibration.
yeah.
I don't mean actual vibration. Although we could also open the container of quantum physics and what is even like at the core of an atom, and quantum physics.
We could.
It's vibration, but that would be like a whole other episode. You're right.
I think so. I think that one probably involves red wine. But no, to come back to this idea of the ego, I mean, we could talk for a long time, about the psychology of this construction called the ego, because it's pretty clear from a neuroscience perspective. There's no self in here. There's no ego. There's no module in the brain, but it is a sort of ongoing dynamic construction, right? And the evolutionary psychologists, have got theories about why it arose. What sort of function it had, and I think that's probably the right track. And the idea is it's about survival, and it's about forming up a solid sense of self so that you can then figure out your relations to other selves, and then
safety, right? Like the ego just wants to keep you safe. So it's in a way it's your. There's no reason to hate it, because it's almost
Correct.
like a psychological mechanism that is having your safety in mind, and you can be thankful. But it's also like paranoid, I think. It just like always assumes it's not safe.
That's exactly it. And in fact, if you think about the world we evolved for a couple of 100,000 years ago, probably on the African savannah, it was an incredibly dangerous world filled with apex predators. So therefore, the connection between our fight-flight systems and the ego were profoundly important for our survival, being a fairly puny species, right? And so better to be wrong 99 times out of 100 about life-threatening things, all right? Yeah. And another little connection to that is that how we did survive was by very high levels of cooperation and social embeddedness. So you had to belong to a tribe. You had to provide, you had to be useful. You had to add to the basic survival quotient of the group. So social rejection was an existential threat. And that's hardwired into us. I mean, our cultural evolution has vastly outstripped our genomic evolution. So we've still got a Stone Age brain and nervous system.
Yeah.
Still reacting as if someone doesn't like me, I'm going to die.
Right. If the tribe rejects you, you're like out there starving, right? So
I'm fucked, like,
yeah.
And so in modern life, so I said two thoughts then. It's always dangerous. In modern life, it's from an existential point of view, it's nowhere near as dangerous. So we don't need this ego intervention all the time. But I also imagine, the second thought was, I can imagine our primordial forebears sitting, they've had their hunt, they've done their gathering, they've eaten, there's no TV, and, they'd be singing to each other, they'd be sitting out in nature. I think they'd be quite creative. They would have been quite meditative, quite contemplative, and very connected to the immediacy of the world around them, right?
Right. Yeah, which requires sensitivity again,
Yeah.
You need to be sensitive to be tuned in to like subtleties of your surroundings and all that,
Exactly. And if you think about then the context of what we're talking about, I've got no doubt that our ancestral forebears were musical, were poetic, were creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously there's ancient art that suggests that. And but just to come back to you now, so there was a trajectory in your professional life. You're doing the touring, and it started, even though you were being successful, and there was this gap between what you'd hoped for, i.e. success, and what you also hope for, i.e. happiness.
Hmm.
And so then you decided that you needed to make some changes. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I made the very hard decision to exit the touring industry, which was a decision that made me feel like I'm ending my career
Yeah.
because as an artist who's not constantly in lineups of the festivals or whatever, you feel like you're disappearing from the screen of like attention, of your
Yeah.
audience or whatever. So, but I still needed to make that call, and it was a tough one. And I think I really reinvented stuff for me doing that because I shifted gear and pivoted more towards more immersive experiences, less is more approach, and then also like literally being guided by what I'm personally interested in versus what's working out there on the market,
Yeah.
because financially it would make more sense for me to DJ to a dance crowd at a big festival than to follow my intuition around what does sound and music do to the nervous system, especially the
Mm.
subtle intricacies of that. So I
Yes.
did decide to take a left turn and follow what I was genuinely interested in, and that wasn't necessarily what made me money in the beginning. But as I was charting that new path for myself, I found that there's also within that niche, if you will, like a lot of potential for me to be explored. And I kept exploring and kept widening that lens. And now I can say it was a good decision with hindsight, because not
Yeah.
only did I exit from a more toxic environment, but I also found something that I feel a little more fulfilled in creatively.
That's so interesting. And there is, I'm doing a number of these interviews in this podcast series on music and mental health. And with the more experienced artists, this is a theme, that there is a sort of, there's a kind of fast and furious beginning in the crew, like where
Uh,
people are burning themselves out, and then there's a questioning of the meaning of life and existence.
mhm, mhm,
And for the ones who've successfully navigated that transition, it's like, no, I'm going to do what I feel is right for me. I'm going to trust in my intuitions. I'm going to keep pursuing what originally had been driving me, right?
mhm. Yeah,
And and it was interesting too. You went through a period there where it wasn't financially rewarding, especially in
yeah,
comparison, and so there would
absolutely.
have been a lot of doubts in your mind, like,
Oh,
what the hell am I doing?
so many doubts and so much anxiety around, am I, like putting the gravestone on my career just by making it right now? But it's literally like, it's again the ego that's freaking out because the ego wants safety, and it
Yeah,
knows that just like staying on that path, which wasn't fulfilling to me, it would probably keep like paying my rent or whatever. It feels more secure. But the other one, that intuitive voice was speaking very loudly, and it was telling
yeah,
me that I'm not fulfilled and that I have creative potential elsewhere. So I literally just followed that, and that's the best advice I could give anyone, especially like emerging artists or whatever, is to overcome the fear of what seems to be the right choice, but it doesn't actually excite you, just
yeah,
because you're like copy-pasting someone else's path, or you're looking at the superficiality of someone else's career and you're like, oh, I should be doing this. But no, like listen to, this faint little voice that speaks,
yeah,
quietly but
yeah,
quite
yeah, yeah,
audibly.
yeah. I know, and I mean, I guess, a person who's beginning out in their career could say, well, it's easy for you, it worked. Like, it's easy for you to say that now, right?
It is never a guarantee, I'm not saying this is the
Yeah,
formula, but I will say there's a formula that is leading you to fulfillment, which is follow your own excitement. You know, if you're like
Exactly.
walking between two doors, unsure which one to take, do I
Yeah.
take this deal or do I go indie or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Like which one lights you up more, And even if there's like fear in it, in the excitement as well, I would
Yes.
always go excitement versus the playing it safe and like the mind, soothing you and like, oh, this is probably like a good idea, you
Exactly.
know?
And again, we're back to that the impetus for creativity, right? And
Yeah.
um, it is interesting that the research also like the single best predictor of a person's creativity is how much they produce, like quantity. And
In, hmm,
and it appears, in my view, and there's a great book called The Talent Code, which explores how I think it's Daniel Coyne or Coyle that explores people who are the best at what they do in various professions, and they've got this
mhm.
thing in common. They're just very deeply motivated and driven by what we call intrinsic motivation. So they're following what they love or they enjoy. And they have a kind of perfectionism that's healthy,
Mhm.
because not all perfectionism is unhealthy. There is certainly unhealthy perfectionism, and that's the ego-driven perfectionism, you
Mhm.
know. But there is a striving kind of perfectionism, which is like using an ideal to approach to keep improving by, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so there's this this learning, this confidence. I remember talking to quite a famous Australian writer, Robert Drew, and he was successful, I think, with his first novel. I think it was called, or one of his early novels anyway, called Body Surfers, and a movie was made from it, and offered a writing contract. He had to write 2 or 3 more novels,
Mhm.
and he said, he naively thought, well, I've written one now; it's going to be easier. And of course, it wasn't. And
Mhm.
he said it never gets facile, it never gets easy.
Mhm.
And he said, but you develop a kind of confidence that that's okay.
Oh yeah,
I've always
I
made that
like.
phrase, a kind of confidence. It's like a
Yeah,
meta level, isn't it? It's like sitting
right.
above all the being comfortable with uncertainty and discomfort.
Oh yeah, that's so true. Like being comfortable with the unknown as well, which is
Yeah,
always part of creative's path. You really never know.
yeah.
You never know what your next creation will be, or whether the idea will come to you or not. There's
I
so many,
know.
like you got to be
I,
comfortable not knowing for sure.
I used to, a long time ago, I ran a program for people at universities who were doing postgraduate work or were doing, postdoc work.
Mm.
And as you may know, there's a huge distinction from undergraduate work to postgraduate work. More or less, in undergraduate work, you're demonstrating that you have some mastery over what's been done before,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And in postgraduate work, you're meant to come up with something original.
Yeah.
And so that's a big struggle for people who've all the way through school and their degree, they've been rewarded for replicating. And now they're being asked to create.
Hmm.
And I always remember I had this group of about 150 people, and I said, "Put your hand up if there's something in your research at the moment that's got you, that you're puzzled by, that you're stuck by, that's causing you great stress." Every hand went up. They're all looking around, thinking they're admitting, their ignorance publicly. And and I said to them, "Well, congratulations. That means you are engaged in a non-trivial pursuit.
Hmm.
That we have to have this uncertainty if we want to be creative. That it comes with the game, you
Right.
know." Anyway, so look, I'm not even sure how long has passed in our conversation,
For me
and it
neither.
feels like we've
I was hoping
barely.
you time.
we've barely scratched the edges. But I would say a couple of things, maybe by way of drawing things together. First is, I'm enormously grateful for your time and for your insights, and very inspired by, and I think people will be inspired by the courage it took for you to do that pivot in your career. But also the practicality of it, that you saw that it was ruining you physiologically and psychologically.
Mm-hmm.
And then you trusted this intuitive feel. You followed your joy, your passion, the quiet voice. That you took practical steps. Obviously you've taken care of your physical body. You still been making a living. It's not like the ego is totally the enemy.
No.
It's saying you have to pay the rent. So I think that'll be very inspiring and very encouraging for people.
Good. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. And hopefully this won't be our only conversation, Robert.
Yeah, I would love to expand. There's so many topics where we could have, take deep dive in the rabbit holes that we almost scratched the surface of, but
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very good start, and so lovely to meet you. I mean, and I've been listening obviously to your music leading up to this, and it's been just a wonderful backdrop. I've had it sort of resonating around me as I'm working, and
nice.
So it's really lovely doing this series and connecting with the musicians, having immersed myself in their music. It's a little different to like reading a book and talking to an author. This is more immersive. So thank you for that. I look forward to us. My absolute pleasure, and I look forward to talking again.
Same here. Thank you, Chris.
You've been listening to the Psychology to Live By podcast. If you'd like to know more, my website is www.drchris.life. And if you like the podcast, share it with people you like so they can like it too. And in this podcast, you've also been listening to a very atmospheric, recently released piece of music by Robert called Circle 28.